G'day, mate. 40 here. And in a battle between the New York Post and Harvard University, you'd be shocked which side I'm going to come down on. You'll be surprised. This is going to knock your yarmulkes off. Would you believe it? So Kevin Michael Grace tweeted 5 hours ago, KMG show will not appear today or any time for the next week. I've been banned by YouTube for repeating Rand Paul's questioning of a Dr. Fauci with a 5-letter surname and for quoting from Dr. Mike Yadon on a certain drug that begins with I. So I don't remember what drug that is, but he ends with the hashtags COVID-19 and sanitary dictatorship. So Kevin, if you're watching, you're welcome to come on this show today and or next week until your show resumes. And I sent Kevin an invite. Okay, Harvard versus the New York Post. Which side do you think I'm going to come down on? So on last night's show, Joseph Cotto and I discussed allegations of vote fraud. Whoa. Yeah, I didn't find the long article terribly convincing because it provided zero corroborating evidence, and I'd never heard of it, which means it didn't resonate. Nobody followed it up, and not even the author ever bothered to follow it up. And it was just hard for me to take it seriously because if only 10% of that article had been true, if you'd been able to substantiate only 10%, your career as a journalist would be made. Your career as a conservative hero would be made. You'd make millions of dollars exposing democratic malfeasance. You'd have beautiful women willing to let you put it anywhere. You'd be on Easy Street. It would be like Good Times Charlie. I mean, everything would be sweet for you. And after this New York Post article came out, it was repeated all around the usual suspects. So let's have a look here at Media Matters. Now, Media Matters is a left-wing organization, but I respect truth from whatever source. So if Media Matters is factually accurate, I tip my yarmulke to Media Matters when they are factually accurate. I tip my yarmulke to communists when they are factually accurate. So Fox News was amplifying this story.
Another thing that has made the conversation really interesting and a bit controversial and contentious is this topic of mail-in ballots. And this is the latest battle that we're seeing emerge on Capitol Hill. Now you have a top Democratic operative coming out and saying that voter fraud with these mail-in ballots is real, that it's not a myth. And he's saying he knows it because he's been doing it for decades. Now, these quotes emerged from this anonymous Democrat in the New York Post. I'll read the first one and then I'll pass it over to Will. The first one says, this is a real thing, and there is going to be a decade. Now, these war coming November 3rd over this stuff. If they knew how the sausage was made, they could fix it. Now, of course, Will, these anonymous quotes, don't always hold weight for many, but this is a heated topic of conversation right now, is it not?
Anonymity can undercut someone's credibility, but it can also free someone to tell.
Yeah, it can free someone to tell the truth. Okay, let's have a look at Laponius. Laponius took it very, very personally when I said that many people who listen to dissident right live streams tend to be failing at life. They often tend to have alcoholic and drug problems. But if you're not failing at life and if you don't have a drug or alcohol problem, then why would it bother you? It's only going to bother you if it resonates with you that you have this problem. So Laponius won't let this go. So on the chat today, he says, sweet Mr. Ford calling his chat friends losers on Cotto yesterday. Yes, I call people who are alcoholics, drug addicts, and they're adults working for $11 an hour. $11 an hour. Yeah, those people are losing at life. Now, if you're not a drug addict, if you're not an alcoholic, if you're not an adult working for $11 an hour, then why would you take that personally? Why on earth would you think I'm talking to you? Like, unless it resonates with you, unless it triggers you in some way, why would you think that I'm talking to you? And yes, I've been out on the streets, the tough, mean streets of Beverly Hills and Los Angeles, and I've had people say, "Oh, I watched your show, and it really pissed me off when you talk about how many alcoholics and drug addicts and losers on the distant right." But finally, I got around to looking at myself. I recognized that I'd been getting high and getting drunk, for the last couple of years, and my girlfriend broke up with me because I was always drunk and high. And so I finally got into Alcoholics Anonymous. I got into Marijuana Anonymous, and now I want to thank you. Luke Ford Show is the most dissident failing at life show I listen to. Doesn't bother me. Speculating on people's motives bothers me. It's mind reading at best. Okay, so I have plenty of firsthand real life experience with alcoholics and drug addicts who have watched this show. And they've told me about it and some of them have talked about getting sober. So I don't know where the mind reading part comes. Obviously, if you have a family and you have a full-time job and you have a normal life, you are going to have less time to watch live streams than if you don't. Right? So I have the experience of hosting this show for 3.5 years, and I used to be much more liberal about who could come on. It used to be anybody could come on. And what did I find out of those people who had the time to come on live streams? That they tended to be drunks and drug addicts and losers, right? They tended to be on disability. They tended to be earning something like $11 an hour at an auto shop. Thank you, very specific example. So there's no mind reading here, bro. This is firsthand experience, both in real life and on this show. So I might know a little bit about my audience because I have probably more interactions with my audience than you do. Dude, I don't drink a drop. I've never gotten high, and I don't make $11 an hour, so it's not personal for me. I watch your streams at the end of the day, bro, after running a business all day. So, right, there's no reason why you take that personally. But people who have more time to watch live streams, generally speaking, they're less likely to have a job that absorbs them and a family that absorbs them. Now, obviously, some people who watch the show have jobs and families that absorb them, but a disproportionate don't, as I've learned from the first-hand experience of having, probably 100 people who've come on this show, over 100 people over the past 3.5 years, and then meeting people in real life and then hearing from people either via DMs or on the phone or email or meeting up with people in real life. So I think I know a little bit about the audience. So George Hawley, the university professor who wrote 2 books on the alt-right, his first book, he expected the alt-right may well be on a trajectory to become the most powerful right-wing movement in the United States, overtaking the conservative movement. But he quickly realized he was wrong. Why did the alt-right not go on a trajectory to overtake the conservative movement as the dominant right-wing movement in this country? Because of the poor quality of its adherents, the high levels of social dysfunction. And you saw this after Trump took office. The alt-right overwhelmingly spent far more time attacking each other than attacking the movement's enemies. This is dysfunction. What type of people are dysfunctional? Right? Do you think you've got high-earning people with families, but just when it comes to alt-right politics, they're dysfunctional? No. If you're dysfunctional in one area of your life, you're probably dysfunctional in all sorts of areas of your life. The total dysfunction of the alt-right after Trump took office, how it just fell apart, how they just went at each other's throats, how this person's feuding with this person. All right, you don't see that with Black Lives Matter. You don't see that with Antifa, because Antifa and Black Lives Matter, these are coherent organizations that apparently provide some sort of social community where people are more likely to bond over shared values and to work on them as opposed to trashing each other. So the obvious dysfunction of the alt-right, you think that just manifested in the political sphere? But aside from like online internet feuding, they had it together, bro. You think, aside from that, they were hanging with family and they were moving ahead in their professional careers and they had upstanding roles in their communities, and they were getting on with their educations. No, it was a symptom of widespread dysfunction. Someone who comes on this show and is gratuitously nasty, they're not just going to be gratuitously nasty on this show. They're going to be gratuitously nasty all throughout their lives, right? You got a problem in one area, you very likely have that problem in many, many areas of your life. So you come on this show and you start feuding unnecessarily. You think that's just a manifestation on this show. There's no connection. The internet's not real, bro. Well, the internet's very real. The internet is a part of the real world, and your behavior online reflects who you are in real life. So I've said many times that I have enjoyed meeting up with many people who watch the show or participate in this show. So there are some very good people in the audience, but I also recognize that much of the distant right is simply dysfunctional. Alt-right are losers who are targeted by the DOJ. Oh, so it's only because of the Department of Justice. Otherwise, these guys would be hanging together. It's only because the Department of Justice that Richard Spencer and Greg Johnson and Matt Heimbach and Jason Kessler and Matt Parrott. It's only, dude, you realize it's only because of the Department of Justice that Matt Heimbach was banging his mother-in-law. It was the Department of Justice, bro. They forced Matt Heimbach to bang his brother-in-law and then mother-in-law. And then when his father-in-law found out about it and Heimbach choked him out, that's only because of the Department of Justice, bro. And Eli Klein, Elliot Mosley, what was his name? The guy who was claiming stolen valor, that he'd been spilling jihadi blood in the Middle East, and turned out he'd not been in service in the Middle East. So total fraud, who'd moved in with this girl, Samantha, and then wouldn't get a job because he just wanted to be a thought leader on podcasts. But the only reason that Eli Klein was claiming stolen valor, the only reason that he was dysfunctional, the only reason that he was like bringing the New York Times over to Richard Spencer's apartment and bringing the New York Times in, even though he knew that they were going to expose his stolen valor claims, the only reason the guy was dysfunctional, it was because the Washington Post had published a negative article about the alt-right, bro. Like, the people in the alt-right, they don't have any agency. So it's the Department of Justice that forces them to be gay. You didn't know that? Come on, mate. It's the Department of Justice. It's that steely gaze of the Department of Justice that turned about 40% of the alt-right gay. Aside from the Department of Justice, these guys would be so straight. These guys would be the straightest guys around. They'd be settling down, getting married, having kids. But it's that gaydar that the Department of Justice is able to shoot into alt-right brains that's turned 40% of the movement gay. Aside from the Department of Justice, you think that there'd be this much gayness in the alt-right? No, bro. It's all because of the Department of Justice. Come on, man. And it's The Nation magazine. The Nation magazine, they published some critical articles about the alt-right, and that's what turned the alt-right dysfunctional. Like, aside from those mean articles in the mainstream media, the alt-right would have been highly functional. They would just all get together and they would bond, and they would say, guys, if we don't hang together, we're going to hang separately. So let's direct our fire at the enemy. Let's cool it with the personal feuds. But it's the Department of Justice. It just took these high-functioning, pro-social, cohesive, wonderful pillars of the community, the salt of the earth, the most upstanding people you could ever find, and just turn them into a bunch of, meth-sniffing neo-Nazis who like to, blow randos that they meet on Grindr. But if it wasn't for the Department of Justice, man, Department of Justice, bloody hell. Can you believe how they turned all these guys gay? It's shocking. Are you saying that Antifa and Black Lives Matter members are functional in their personal lives? Come on, man. I don't know, but they certainly don't demonstrate the dysfunction that the alt-right has shown. Can we have kosher on Pico Boulevard, bro? Says yes. Come on, Ford. Who is gay in the alt-right? That's the point. You'll never know the personal stories of Antifa members because the press won't do exposés on them. Yeah, it has nothing to do with Antifa being relatively cohesive. It's just that the Department of Justice is not shooting their antisocial X-rays into the mind of Antifa so that they're less likely to turn on each other, right? Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and alt-right, none of them have any agency. They're all just products of the system, bro. It's the system that's doing this. You can't fight the system, bro. Don't you know that? The system's turning people gay, and system's making people dress up like Nazis, and the system's forcing people to throw Roman salutes, and the system is preventing Antifa and Black Lives Matter members from squabbling with each other. None of these people have any agencies. It's all the system, bro. It's the media. The media is just part of the system, bro. And 40, he's part of the system. Yes, I'm part of the system. I am a citizen of the United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, I'm part of the system. Yes, 40, not getting arrested and sued is good for morale. Yeah, because, I mean, these alt-right people who got arrested, they weren't doing anything wrong, bro. I didn't do nothing. They were just sitting there studying Nietzsche. And then the system came along and arrested them. And guess what? The alt-right members who got sued, they weren't doing nothing. They didn't do nothing. They didn't do nothing, man. They didn't do nothing at all. They were just sitting there studying Oswald Spengler. And then for just no reason whatsoever, just like out of the blue, just pure maliciousness, that they got sued. That they have no responsibility for what happened to them. Nothing they did put them in an awkward position. It's not their words. It's not their actions. They completely lack agency. It's only because they got sued by this Jewish lady lawyer. That's what turned them gay. That's what made them dysfunctional. It's the pressure of being sued by this lesbian Jewish attorney, and then they just lost it and started blowing randos that they met on Grindr. Aside from that, these were the straightest, most functional, sweetest, kindest, best people that you could ever imagine. It's not like stress reveals people's character. It's the stress of being sued by some, Jewish lesbian lawyer, and it just destroyed them. Destroyed them. You're not being honest, bro. How? Because Antifa did nothing wrong. No illegal acts, bro. Never said that. Come on, man. Cut out the malarkey. All right, let's just go through. Let's go through some of Laponius's comments from yesterday's live stream, and some of the other comments that I did not get to on the show with Joseph Cotto yesterday. So, what about inflation? Oh my God. Oh my God. Susie, we might have some inflation. Like, oh my God, how will the Republic survive? Oh, Brenda, we might have some inflation coming our way. And the country's just going down the tubes, because if we get a few months of inflation, I mean, that's just it. I might just end it all. My God, we've got inflation. What about inflation, 40? What about inflation? The country's just going to fall apart if used car prices go up. We're not going to be able to handle that. Causing billions in damage over the summer last year is not an illegal act. It's a life that works. I don't know if it's a life that works. I don't know what's going to happen in the long run. But you know what is not a life that works? It's blaming all your problems on sources outside of yourself. That doesn't work. That's a sure mark of a loser and someone who's going nowhere in life. That, oh, all my problems, it's because of that Jewish lesbian lawyer who's suing me, and I didn't do nothing wrong. Didn't do nothing at all. I'm targeting you. I'm coming after you, bro. I am coming for you. My coach, he's giving me a $500 bonus. This is what do they call that in the NFL? Like targeting. But yeah, I got a bonus if I can knock you out of the game. My coach, yeah, Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel's going to give me $500 to go after Little Ponius today. You don't know if burning cities down is a life that works. Seriously? Yeah, seriously. Guess what? Sometimes being nasty, sometimes making people fear you, sometimes that's a very effective tactic. I wish that wasn't true. I wish the world did not work the way it does. I wish that people could just compose poetry and sing songs and just love one another and never break the law and never threaten anyone. And I wish that everyone who did bad, illegal, criminal, destructive, nasty things just got punished. But I wish the world was not the way it is. But I did not create the world. I just observe it. And yes, sometimes being nasty, sometimes doing illegal things, sometimes that's very effective. And sometimes it's ineffective. I wish that wasn't true. I wish the world was different than the way it is. But I'm just looking out the window at reality, and you'd have to say right now that there's a good chance that Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and the billions and billions of dollars of damage that they did in 2020, that may very well turn out to be a socially effective and politically effective tactic for them. And it may well be a socially and effective political tactic until a certain point when it massively backfires on them. I don't know. I'm just looking out there at reality and just trying to share with you, as you share with me, what I see. The Department of Justice has nothing to do with the effectiveness of Antifa. I'm sure it probably plays a role, but I'm not going to say that the decisions of individual Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and alt-right members have nothing to do with their status. Not even riffing off the news. Is this the Malarkey cast? So yeah, sometimes burning things down is a socially effective, politically effective thing to do. I wish that wasn't true. I wish violence never worked. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But oh my God, we got inflation. Like how can 40 have some optimism about America when we've got inflation? I mean, come on. Isn't it time that President Biden just scraps his economic agenda because Americans are rushing to buy used cars, bro? I mean, we've got inflation. It's time for Biden to just scrap his whole agenda because the price of used cars is going up. So we've had a spike in the inflation rate, right? It's the first time since 2011 that it's gone above 4%. So does this unexpectedly high inflation mean the economy now has less room to run than the Biden administration, the Federal Reserve, had assumed? I'm looking here at Paul Krugman's column in the New York Times. I mean, do we have to have Biden scale back his spending plans? Does the Fed need to consider raising interest rates? I mean, are we looking at 1970s stagflation? No, there's no reason to believe that this inflation is going to be like 1970s stagflation. Right? We don't have that underlying situation. It looks like a temporary blip, reflecting transitory disruptions as the economy struggles to recover from pandemic disruptions. So Paul Krugman says it's a bad idea for policymakers to panic in the face of such a blip. So there was a surge in consumer prices in late 2010 into 2011, driven mainly by rising prices of oil. Consumer prices hit 3.8%. And Representative Paul Ryan was grilling Ben Bernanke, intoning there is nothing more insidious than a country can do to its citizens than debase its currency. But Ben Bernanke refused to be rattled. The Fed stayed focused on core inflation. So that's a measure that excludes volatile food and energy prices, and that the Fed rightly considers a better gauge of underlying inflation than the headline number. The Fed's cool head was vindicated. Inflation quickly subsided. The dollar was not debased. Politicians elsewhere were not so level-headed. So the European Central Bank panicked, raised interest rates despite very high unemployment, worsened the country's burgeoning debt crisis. So it's not time to panic. This is just not going to be an entertaining show because every other live stream tells you, it's time to panic. We got inflation. It's time to panic. We're just going down the tubes. right? We're going to have a weird recovery. We're going to have some bumps, but we're not heading for stagflation right now. I mean, but what the heck do I know? I didn't even finish my BA degree from UCLA in economics.
Tell the truth. It's a double-edged knife, if you will, the cloak of anonymity. What you might get is detail. Detail that someone feels free to share with you, like this. This whistleblower, this former Democratic operative, explained how mail-in balloting fraud would work. He says you'd have a postman who's a rabid anti-Trump guy, and he's working in Bedminster, some Republican stronghold, and he can take those filled-out ballots, and knowing 95% are going to go to Republicans, he can just throw them in the garbage. Pete, what this says to me, it really isn't a partisan issue. Although this is a Democratic operative, and that's an important note. If you are a Democrat, you would be concerned about this as well, because it shows the vulnerability of mail-in balloting. There's a reason that we have all these protections when you go to the ballot box. Overseers, making sure you're free from influence, making sure it's a pure ballot. None of those exist when it comes to mail-in balloting.
Yeah, but it feels a lot like a partisan issue, I got to be honest with you, Will. The Postal Service union endorsed too. Joe Biden. Who always wants to make sure there isn't voter ID? Democrats. Who are the ones that want to expand mail-out balloting, where you push ballots? Who never wants to clean voter rolls of people who are dead or who have moved? Democrats. So it feels like loosening of the rules is a partisan thing on one side of the aisle, whereas Republicans are saying, we think you should have an ID to vote. We think you should be able to absentee vote, but not push votes out. We're open to making more robust in-person voting, so you know that your ballot is being cast. And this is concerning because it's just individuals. It's also ballot harvesting. Here's one more aspect of what they did in the New York Post. There are nursing homes where the nurse is actually a paid operative, and they go room by room to these old people who still want to feel like they're relevant. They literally fill it out for them. And again, the conflation is often made of absentee balloting, which is different. You have a chain of custody with one individual, and mail-out balloting, where you're sending out ballots to post office boxes, hoping the people live there, the kids are not at college, they haven't moved on, someone hasn't passed away, and then not having full accountability on what comes back. That worries people, and the president, rightfully so.
Pete, you're right that one political party stands to benefit from a ballot box that has less integrity to it, that one political party seems to want that integrity loosened up while another wants it tightened down. But I truly believe no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter which way you vote, as individuals, human beings out there, Americans out there, want integrity in their vote, want integrity at the ballot box. And what I'm saying is, I think this issue should be alarming for you no matter which political party you belong to, as long as you care about integrity of your ballot, Jedediah.
Yeah, and is there fraud is the question with respect to these mail-in ballots. Is there fraud? I mean, some of those quotes sound terrifying, and your common sense would lead you to a place where you'd say, well, this definitely could happen. It certainly could. I don't know to what level it's happening. I don't know if it's happening at all. I don't know if that quote about the nursing homes is something happening right now. And you can turn around and say, well, it can happen either way, right? You could have a nursing home operative that can't stand Joe Biden and maybe wants to paralyze the system in another way. So I don't know if it's happening, and I don't know if there's a way to properly prevent it from happening, because you can always have bad actors in the system. People by nature are flawed, and there are going to be people that want the system to collapse no matter what. So I don't know how you tackle the problem, but I think it makes for an interesting conversation, Pete, as you brought up the larger issue of voter fraud, the larger issue of voter ID, I think comes into play, and those are separate debates, but somewhat connected loosely.
You've got to check your ID to get on a plane, but the most sacred thing you do, your neighbor can vouch for you, or you don't even have to vouch for yourself. Sign a ballot, take it away. You can get identification for free in a lot of these voter ID laws. It feels intentional, and it feels very one-sided.
I want to move.
All right, you're not against having a conversation, are you guys? They just want to have a conversation, right? Everybody with views that are considered out there, they just want to have a conversation. Come on, man, you're not against having a conversation. So all the normal suspects started retweeting this bogus New York Post article. And Eric Trump said the article is a must-read. And Mindy Robinson, this is exactly what the Dems and the Rhinos just pushed through in Nevada. Fox Business executive editorial bloke Charles Brady criticized the mainstream media, told them to stop editorializing, start reporting the news. Come and report this news from the New York Post. Judicial Watch Tom Fitton, voter fraud is real And 2 comments, says Tom Fitton. John Fund read a debunked book on voter fraud, shared the article. Bloomberg opinion columnist shared the article. Political Insider explains voter fraud with mail-in ballots. Talk show host Howie Carr wrote the article was an example of Democrats in the news. Mark Levin, mail-in voter fraud. Former Fox and Friends host Patty Ann Brown shared it. Dem operative admits fixing ballots for decades. This is a real thing. Washington Examiner covers it. OAN, One American News, covers it.
A top Democrat operative confesses to fixing mail-in ballots on a grand scale. The anonymous Democrat made these comments in a New York Post article, claiming voter fraud, especially with vote by mail, is not a myth. The whistleblower says he was contributing to the elections of some of the New Jersey's top elected officials. According to the Post, his claims are backed by campaign records. He admitted to not only tampering with ballots himself, but also leading teams of people participating in the effort.
So the New York Post tells us that his claims, they're backed by records. And if the author, John Levine, had simply produced any of these records, he would be a star. But he didn't want to be a star. He didn't want to be banging checks from coast to coast. He didn't want to make millions of dollars. He didn't want to be acclaimed as a hero of the Republic. So he couldn't be bothered following up on the article or presenting any of these supposedly substantiating evidence. Okay, and they kept going on Fox
a Democratic
and Friends.
insider sharing his secrets with the New York Post about voter
Democratic
fraud
insider,
and
bro.
fixing mail-in ballots, saying, quote, this is a real thing. And there's going to be a war coming November 3rd over this stuff. If they knew how the sausage was made, they could fix it. Maybe that's the point of this story. Joining us now, the reporter who got the interview, John Levine. John, first off, what made you convinced that this guy was for real, or this person was for real?
You know, it's just, he came to us. Well, first, Brian, thank you for having me on the show. I'll say that he came to us, and it was the level of detail.
And you've all heard of John Levine, right? Famous investigative reporter. Well, I Googled him. He doesn't have any track record as an investigative reporter. He has a track record as a political Republican hack.
He was able to offer, and the story he was able to tell. And
he came to us with a great story, guys. It's just the story just had so many details. It just had to be true. I mean, this is top tier journalism here.
You know, obviously, we had to keep him anonymous because, you know, he would face, you know, very severe prosecution for some of the stuff he was talking about. And, you know, the evidence he presented us, and, you know, just, this is a very serious guy in New Jersey. I would not say a household name, but it's someone who, you know.
Very serious guy, and he had details, bro. I mean, I'm a journalist with the esteemed New York Post, and this guy, he was a serious guy, and he came to me with details. So how would we not publish the story based on an anonymous source who's coming with details, and he's a serious guy? Yeah.
Oh, you could see he has a very long track record.
You could see it. You could just see he had a long track record. He had details, and he was a serious guy.
With some of the biggest politicians in that state, up and down. And, you know, once he started talking, and once it sort of came from the horse's mouth, it was both. It was revealing, but also chilling, I would say.
It was revealing and chilling when this guy started talking, because you know what he provided? He provided details. And it was just so revealing and so chilling that this dude came along who's a very serious dude, and he came with details. Like, who among us can say that he would be impervious to some serious dude coming to us with details? I mean, it's amazing that this did not turn John Levine gay. I mean, he's a serious dude coming to him with details. Must have been so exciting.
So we
see what you
right.
do.
I mean, it flawed me, and then it wasn't surprising to see the Fox and Friends weekend do it and talked about your story. It was on Sunday's New York Post. So you talked to this anonymous source, and he says not only has he done it himself, he trains others to do it in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, as well as New York. And here's an idea of what he does. Here's an example. A Democratic operative. It's a real thing. There's going to be a blanking war come November 3rd over this stuff.
hey, the dude is a serious dude, and he told us it's a real thing. So, I mean, how on earth could you have any skepticism when the dude says this is a real thing? The anonymous source says this is a real thing, and he provides details. Just very disturbing.
And if they knew how it's done, this is how they could fix it. And one of the areas in which you delve into it, how they do it, is the envelope is much more foolproof than the ballot. The key is getting the envelope, correct?
Right. You know, what he would say is, you know, your voter is mailed the ballot. And then once the ballots go out, they just fan out and they knock on doors and they convince people to hand over completed ballots, which you might be thinking, well, that's crazy. But he laughed. He's like, well, you know, that's easier than you think. And they say, oh, hello, I'm a, you know, district leader. I'm with the county, this or that. You know, I'm here to mail your ballot. And he says a shocking number of people will just hand over completed ballots. And, you know, there's an area in the article where he says, you know, you got to make sure to sprinkle the ballots in different mailboxes, because if you put them all in one mailbox, it's too suspicious. And there was a voter fraud job that he pointed to that got busted, and he was laughing, and he's like, I would never make that mistake because they put all the ballots in one mailbox.
So they open up the envelope, right? They open up the envelope and they'll put the new ballot in, then they close it again. They steam it open. Here's another quote from your story about employees. Says, you have a postman, for example, who's a rabid anti-Trump guy, and he's working in Bedminster for some Republican stronghold. He can take those blank ballots, knowing 95% are going to be Republican. He can just throw those in the garbage. And I guess he's done that.
Stopping it. I mean, and how would you know? And, you know, once a ballot is cast, that's it. You don't get to cast another one. And, you know, there's no mechanism to prevent that. And there's been cases in New York, which are documented in this article, where, you know, I think 500 ballots were delivered to the Board of Elections 8 months later. And it was just like, you know, they were found in a corner somewhere. And we don't know how they got there, who put them there. And those people ended up being disenfranchised.
So, you know, in New Jersey, we already know what a debacle it was in these primaries, and the New York had one too, with ballots being left on postal floors or not appearing at all. Another quote you have is from a nursing home, for example. You said, anonymous, the operative talks about rigging nursing home ballots. There are nursing homes where the nurse is actually a paid operative, and they go room by room to those old people who still want to feel like they're relevant, and they literally fill it out for them.
Yeah, you don't even need to steam anything open. You don't even need to steam it open in that case. It's, you know, this has been called granny harvesting in the past, you know, and they don't even have to steam it open because the nurse is on the payroll, and then they just go and the nurse gives a stack of ballots that, you know, it's like, hello, we're going to do the ballot together, and then you know it's both fraud and it's elder abuse. Frankly.
And John, what did you walk away with out of all this, the operation? When you were done with the interview and you wrote the story, what did you walk away with?
You know, the takeaway for me, and his takeaway too, is that you don't need to, like, the answer here is not to abolish mail-in voting, but that there are some very, very easy ways to just make it a lot safer. You know, things like you know, having a watermark or barcode, or just, you know, he was saying how, you know, treat a ballot with the same security you treat the money. I could never take a $20 bill and put it into a copy machine and come out with a new $20 bill that I could just go spend at the store, because that's a one-way ticket to jail. Treat a ballot like that. Put security features like that in.
Right. Make
it as secure as the money. And just voter education. Don't hand your ballot to a random person that knocks at your door saying they can deliver it for you. Do it yourself.
Read this story, and you'll no longer say election fraud's impossible, and it's so alarming. John, good job. Thanks for bringing this forward.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
All right, still ahead.
Yeah, boy, that really changed my mind. I mean, that guy. I mean, nothing gets past John Levine. He's obviously a maven on the whole issue of voter fraud, mail-in ballots. I mean, he sounds like he's just on top of it. Wow, what a confidence boost for his article. And who's John Levine? He holds a bachelor's degree from New York University. He has a master's degree from Columbia University. He used to work for CCTV News. So CCTV News in Beijing, he was a producer for CCTV News. That's a Chinese Communist Party news outlet. Then he worked for Mediaite, and then he worked for The Wrap, and he's been a staff writer at Mike and a producer for the Chinese Communist Party. So if you can't trust John Levine to be on top of stories like these, I mean, who can you trust?
Now, the latest talking point, conspiracy theory, is Donald Trump will win big on Election Day, but when all the other votes get counted, it really will be Biden. Okay, good luck with that. There was a
Wait, that's exactly what happened. So they were telling it. See, this is September 1, 2020. So for more than 6 weeks prior to the election, the conventional wisdom was that there'd be a red mirage on Election Day. And then because Trump voters were more likely to vote in person, then when the mail-in ballots start getting counted, and because of Republican legislatures forbade the counting of mail-in ballots until after the polls had closed, then you'd get the Biden surge. And whoa, the conventional wisdom turned out to be exactly right. You had a red mirage early on Election Day, and then after the polls closed and mail-in ballots started to be counted, then Biden surged to victory.
a huge expose in the New York Post, a Democrat, literally confessions of voter fraud. I was a master at fixing mail-in ballots. Wow, top Democrat operative gone on the record and now saying voter fraud, especially mail-in ballots, is, fraud is no myth. And he knows because he's been doing it on a grand scale for decades. And he goes into chapter and he goes into verse exactly how we do it. An election that is swayed by 500 votes, 1,000 votes, it can make all the difference. It could be enough to flip states. The whistleblower's identity, by the way, they should be brought to Washington. Long history of working as a consultant to various campaigns. Oh, and he mentored at least 20 operatives in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, which is, of course, a critical swing state.
Yeah, he mentored. He mentored in some of the finest spas in New York City. He was mentoring these young men. And so you can see how credulous much of the right-wing media is. Like, sometimes the left is right about the right, and sometimes the right is about the left. And there is a persistent critique by the more intelligent members of the left that there is amongst much of the conservative media establishment, such as Fox News and talk radio, not much concern with what is true, not much concern with what is factual, and just a general hysterical and irresponsible attitude, which you see in these clips. And Tucker Carlson is frequently awesome and frequently irresponsible.
So we have more bad news for you. The president apparently is still stealing mailboxes across the country. Democrats are convinced that's happening. They're close to cracking the case. By the way, they're also completely sure that there's no risk whatsoever of nationwide mail-in balloting. They say that's a conspiracy theory. But now, a Democratic Party operative anonymously has made a confession. Our own Rick Leventhal has details on that revealing story. Rick?
Well, Tucker, as you said, Democrats have consistently dismissed concerns about mail-in ballot fraud as a myth or overblown. But a New York Post reporter says the truth is chilling, that abuse is easy and widespread. Interviewing a Democratic operative who claims he's been fixing or manipulating mail-in ballots in multiple states for decades. The operative spoke on condition of anonymity, fearing prosecution, he said, calling himself a master at fixing ballots, telling the Post some methods are really simple, like sending a team into a neighborhood after ballots are mailed out and then knock on the doors and convince people to hand them over. The operative claims a shocking number of people actually do that, and then they can just throw out the ballots cast for the other side. He says postal workers are sometimes in on the scam, tossing loads of ballots from areas known as Republican strongholds. Another method allegedly targets nursing homes.
Oh,
this has been called granny harvesting in the past, and they don't even have to steam it open because the nurse is on the payroll, and then they just go and the nurse gives a stack of ballots that, it's like, hello, we're going to do the ballot together. And then at that, it's both fraud and it's elder abuse, frankly.
Well, the source says he and his operatives did their dirty work in local, state, and federal elections in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, which, of course, is a key swing state in the upcoming election, Tucker.
What a story. Rick Leventhal, thank you for that.
What a story. What a story. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Rick. Wow. What a story. Whoa. Scary. They're stealing our democracy, people. The chat loves hating on Luke, and Luke loves hating on the chat. Okay, so thank God for Harvard University. It has released a 49-page analysis of these types of allegations. And this analysis is called Mail-in Voter Fraud, Anatomy of a Disinformation Campaign. For the New York Post, it is John Levine's reporting on an alleged Democratic operative who anonymously and without corroborating evidence confessed to running a network of operatives across 3 states for many years. Hey, did you guys know that I ran a network of operatives across 57 states? And between us, we've fixed every presidential election since 1980. I just want to confess. I mean, me and my network of operatives. Okay, this dude ran a network of operatives across 3 states for many years and committing practically every one of the acts that President Trump alleged about how voter fraud works. Wow, just imagine that. This really high-powered Democratic operative, he comes forward and confesses to the New York Post that he just happened to commit all the acts that President Trump alleged. Wow, what a coincidence. Now, who was pumping this story? The story was pumped by the president's sons, by the president's campaign staff, and occupied Fox and Friends and Tucker Carlson for 3 nights. The report by John Levine of the New York Post opened with the words, "A top Democratic operative says voter fraud, especially with mail-in ballots, is no myth. And he knows this because he's been doing it on a grand scale for decades." Levine quoted the single anonymous source as asserting that fraud is more the rule than the exception, and that he has led teams of fraudsters, and he's mentored at least 20 operatives in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, a critical 2020 swing state. The source remained anonymous for fear of prosecution, but he's been mentoring these young men in some of the finest bathhouses in the Northeast, but only because the Department of Justice made him do so. The story read as a list of greatest hits from Trump's allegations over the previous 6 months. But I'm sure that's just coincidental that the story and this operative just come up with, it's just a list of the greatest hits from Trump's allegations, hitting all the high points of the months-long propaganda campaign. It wove in a specific reference to New Jersey, where the Patterson case was a central exhibit in Trump's campaign's voter fraud claim, and asserted there is no race in New Jersey from city council to the United States Senate that we haven't worked on. It then asserted the ease of fraud associated with mail-in ballots. I just put the ballot through the copy machine and it comes out the same way, the insider said. The story then wove in the continuous complaints about ballot harvesting, stating that he would have his operatives fan out going from house to house, convincing voters to let them mail completed ballots on their behalf as a public service. The fraudster and his minions would then take the sealed ballot envelopes home and hold them over boiling water. You have to steam it to loosen the glue, said the insider. They have steam boiler rooms, guys. Steam boiler rooms. Oy vey. He would then remove the real ballot, placing the counterfeit ballot inside the signed certificate, and reseal the envelope. The whistleblower then conveniently confirmed the line that postal employees were going to, as Trump had said, just grab a bunch of ballots. The tipster said sometimes postal employees are in on the scam. You have a postman who is the rabid anti-Trump guy. He's working in Bedminster or some Republican stronghold. He can take those filled out ballots, and knowing 95% are going to a Republican, he can just throw those in the garbage. Oh my gosh. In some cases, mail carriers were members of his work crew and would sift ballots from the mail and hand them over to the operative. To complete the tapestry, the story harps on the fears of older voters. Hitting up assisted living facilities and helping the elderly fill out their absentee ballots with a gold mine of votes, the insider said. There are nursing homes where the nurse is actually a paid operative. And by golly, they go room to room, to these old people who still want to feel like they're relevant, said the whistleblower. They literally fill it out for them. So, the story immediately exploded across the right-wing media ecosystem, with attention directed to it energetically by the Trump family and campaign. President's sons, Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, tweeted it out, as did Trump campaign communications director Tim Murtaugh and Deputy Communications Director Zach Parkinson, alongside various Fox contributors and veteran conspirators. Jack Posobiec. Jack Posobiec tweeted it. The story alleged a widespread systematic fraud operation operating across multiple states for decades and involving at least 20 operatives, yet it relied on a sole anonymous source. While Media Matters published a criticism of the article's method and its reporter, no mainstream media outlet was willing or able to pick up the mantle and seek to confirm or refute these remarkable accusations. The story remains unconfirmed except for repetition on Fox News Online, on Fox and Friends on both Sunday, August 30th, Monday, August 31st, on Tucker Carlson on Tuesday, September 1, and on online media like the Washington Examiner and the Daily Caller, itself reporting on the Tucker Carlson report. On Facebook, the Breitbart repetition of this story gained more engagement than versions elsewhere in the right-wing media ecosystem. So the more the story's picked up, that just shows how true it is, guys. Given the momentous allegations, it's hard to imagine that no reporter in a traditional media outlet looked into this. One has to assume that no one found corroboration despite the supposed widespread conspiracy that this practice would require. Also, that no one was able to specifically refute it, given that the source was anonymous. Levine, too, did not add any follow-up reporting with more evidence or more details. It is hard to credit the story as true based on a single report in a Murdoch-owned tabloid alleging a widespread, many-participant, years-long criminal conspiracy carried out over several states, self-based on a single anonymous source and offering no supporting documentation. If the story is untrue, it is also impossible to tell whether Levine is the perpetrator or a willing victim of someone else's information operation, and if so, whose? What is clear is that in the propaganda feedback loop that has increasingly characterized the right-wing media ecosystem for the past 3 decades, well, you could say the same thing about large parts of the left-wing media ecosystem. And for a Trump campaign that has long been pushing every element of this narrative, this was a story too good to be checked. When President Trump concluded his performance in the first presidential debate, September 29, 2020, he reiterated the false claim that mail-in ballots were subject to mass election fraud. He cited this concern to justify his refusal to commit to accepting the results of the election should he be defeated. This assertion capped a 6-month-long disinformation campaign waged by the president and his party against expansion of mail-in voting during the pandemic of 2020.